Hey, campfire crew, let's get it on.
Man Followed Me Home by K9C49. This probably won't be the most insane story out there, but I've been thinking about it recently. When I was around 11, I lived in an apartment complex in sort of a sketchy neighborhood. Next to the complex was a memorial park that I often took walks in. That day was just like any other. I was doing my walk around with my brother, who was 13 at the time. While we were walking, I felt a sense of paranoia the entire time, like someone was watching me. I reasoned it off as just my anxiety, which was pretty severe in my tween years. While we were walking down a hill, my brother found his friend and basically ditched me. I didn't mind that, though. I just kept walking along the trail. As I made it to sort of a secluded spot, I noticed a dog all alone. I looked at the tag very quickly, and I heard something behind me. I stood up and saw a really creepy guy, sort of in the distance, but still a weirdly close spot to be in a secluded area. He walked up to me and said it was his dog, so I promptly nodded my head and left. Continuing my walk, I swore I could see him in the corners of my eye. I was getting freaked out, so I went to go find my brother, and eventually finding him, I explained the situation. He assumed it was just my anxiety, but agreed to go home anyway. He didn't want me to be stressed. Making our way home, I saw the man who I thought was stalking me get into his car. It was a beat-up white Hyundai. I told my brother how I was getting worried because I didn't want to lead this stalker back to our complex. So we grabbed our bikes and started riding down to the gas station nearby. Not long after being in the gas station, that same exact car showed up in the parking lot. The man was sitting in it, glaring at us. My brother took note of that, and now he was actually believing me, and that it wasn't just my nerves. We rode home as quickly as possible, making sure the man wasn't in sight before rushing into our apartment. We explained the situation to our mom, and she just said it was probably nothing, that he was probably just driving around. She always tried to make a situation less stressful for us. She just didn't want us to worry. That night, someone knocked on our door. Mom looked through the peephole, but she didn't open the door. She asked what the person needed, and the person said that his car broke down. My brother and I peeked through the window to see who it was, and it was the stalker. We must not have been sneaky enough getting in. We told my mom to not open the door, which she told him to piss off. Since then, and up until we moved out, I've seen that guy around a lot, just kind of creeping, staring, driving around. I stopped going on walks in the memorial park since then, and honestly, I think if I didn't look back when I'd seen that dog, I might have been scooped up right there and then. So, to the creepy guy who was stalking me and my brother, let's not meet again. Knock at the Door by Sandeep S. This almost felt like a dream. I woke up to my dog Lucy barking one time. She was upright on the bed where my husband and I were sleeping with our 22-month-old daughter. She was staring at our door like an unknown stranger was out there rummaging around. I thought she was just freaking out over a house noise. We'd only had her for 3 months, and she was still a puppy. It could have been anything. Our roommates, a creak from the house settling, the awnings moving outside in the breeze. At first, I wasn't too concerned. I decided the best bet would be to open the door and show her that nothing was there. It sounds a bit silly, but it's what we do with our daughter when she gets scared, and I figured it should work with a puppy. I opened the door, and she raced to the front door. She stood there, snarling, and it was an angry, violent growl, one I'd never heard her make before. I looked at her groggily and opened the baby gate blocking the doorway, planning to open the door and show her that everything was okay. The second my hand reached for the deadbolt, Lucy went wild. She started barking and jumping toward me, and when I touched the metal deadbolt, she suddenly changed her temper. She whimpered, almost like she was afraid, and was now backing down. As her mannerism changed, so did mine. I wasn't calm anymore. My heart was racing and sinking at the same time. I'd been flooded with a mixture of fear and dread. I looked through the peephole. I can't explain why I looked, but I did. Outside were 2 kids. One was just a smidgen shorter than me and didn't look much younger. I was 21 at the time. She looked to be 16 or 17. She was slender and pale, and her hair was a light shade of honey blonde. She wore it long, about mid-back, with long, thin, blunt bangs in the front that covered most of her eyes. She was wearing jeans, a light wash that was popular, and a thin-looking olive-covered pullover-style hoodie. She held the hand of a smaller girl who looked to be around 3 or 4, in the same style of jeans and a button-down ivory cardigan. The smaller one looked at the floor shyly, but had the same shade of hair tied back in a ponytail. She had a stuffed toy under her free arm, but it was identical to one my daughter has, as was their style of dress. Had it not been for my feeling of overwhelming dread and fear, I probably would have asked these children in and given them some tea or hot chocolate to get them out of the bitter cold. But something about them seemed off. At that point, I hadn't made any noise. I hadn't shushed the dog or grumbled or anything. I hadn't even turned on any lights. These kids had no indication that I was at the door. But the older one spoke. She had a voice that was mature, confident, strong, and accentless. She held her head tilted downward, and I couldn't see her eyes. She said, "We have to use your phone." I stood frozen in fear. How did she know I was at the door? She raised her head to face me directly, and that was when I saw her eyes. There was a reason I couldn't see them through her bangs before. They were black, or midnight blue, or dark, dark purple. They were otherworldly. Then she said, "Our mother is worried." As someone who has always been interested in creepy stories, I knew what she was the second that she looked at me through the door. I'd never been one to believe in these things. I'm a staunch atheist and skeptic when it comes to the paranormal. I'd written off many ghost stories from friends and family members eager to tell their tales. I didn't believe those stories. But still, I couldn't rationalize my way out of this one. I was standing with nothing but a thin wooden door between me and a black-eyed kid. There was no questioning what was right in front of me. I didn't answer her. Silently and slowly, I backed away from the door, Lucy still cowering at my ankles. The girl kept talking. "Just let us in to use your phone." I took another step back, and with that step, the tone changed. At first, she seemed polite, but when I took that second step back, she became commanding, almost hostile. "We're not going to hurt you. If we wanted to do that, we would have broken in. I'll ask again. May we come in and use your phone?" Lucy snarled at the door, and I inched backward, though something inside me seemed to be slowly pulling me back toward the door. It wasn't a physical pulling so much as a subconscious need to go back and let them in. I got to my room, covered up the window, and locked the door, and sat there in the dim light of the nightlight. I heard her call me back to the door once more, and then everything went quiet. I didn't go back to sleep that night, and to be honest, I haven't slept right since. I know from reading about them that black-eyed children can't just come in without permission. I've also read that they haven't hurt anyone, but I still felt that I would be the exception. When I told my husband, he said it was all just a dream. He keeps telling me to forget about it. But this lingering feeling of sadness, this dread when my house is silent at night, this fear of another knock at the door, all of that tells me otherwise. Stupid Teenagers Making Stupid Mistakes by Accomplished Ebb. Trigger warning. This is a pretty messed up story. Please don't judge me. I was only a kid, and kids make really dumb mistakes. I'm a female. When I was 15, I used to talk to people online. One man who claimed to be 26 said he would pay me a lot of money to pretend to be his girlfriend to his family. Then his requests became more disturbing. He said he wanted to have a baby with me for $20,000. He then suggested that my friend and I go to his house to do some very messed up things with him for a lot of money. My friend and I planned to get the money from him and then run away. We were very stupid and should have told a parent about what he was saying to me. We decided to meet up with him one day in a crowded area so he couldn't kidnap us. He looked much older than 26 and was fat and scary looking. He bought us some smokes and gave us $50, saying he would give us the rest that night when we met up again. When we left, he texted me saying that he could see my underwear through my shorts. I was really creeped out, but being young and dumb, my friend and I were determined to get the money and then report him to the police. We met up with him later across the road from a park in front of some houses. He was in a car and told us to get in, but I said, "Hey, show us the money," and he showed us about $1,000. I said, "Pass me the money and then I'll get in the car," but he insisted I get in the car first. I sat on the edge of the seat, and the guy said, "Now tell your friend to get in the car too, and I'll give it to you." I refused and said, "Give me the money first." Just then a man came out of a house asking if we were okay, and the guy in the car sped down the road a bit before driving off completely. After that, we decided to try to catch him again to get his license plate number so we could report him to the police. Unfortunately, when we first saw him, we never looked at the license plate. He never tried meeting up with us again, so I gave my Facebook information to the police so they could try to catch him. It turns out he didn't tell us his real name and got rid of his phone right after that, so they never did catch him. I know we were very stupid, but this clearly shows that parents really need to monitor what their children are doing. Uncle Josh note here, not passing any judgment on you whatsoever. When I was in my early teens, my friend Ryan and I were skipping youth group, just running around town and having fun. We hated youth groups, so we always just left. And one night, while we were in a parking lot, a very attractive older woman tried to get us to get into her car, and I was all for it, being the young, horny, idiot kid that I was. And thankfully, my buddy Ryan talked me out of it, and we ended up running. But I understand what it's like to be in those situations. Yeah, you might have gone a little further than most, but hey, kids do stupid stuff, and I have a boatload of stupid things that I've done that I'm going to make sure that my daughter never does. I guess we live and learn. Thanks for the story. The Table by Star347. When I was in 6th grade, so like 12 years old, I was invited by one of the popular girls to her slumber party for her birthday. And I was very excited to go because it was my first year at a private Catholic school, and I was still trying to make friends. Everyone was looking forward to one girl coming in particular. She'd switched schools, so I'd never met her before. We were looking forward to seeing her because she was bringing her special table to the party. They all said this table could answer your questions. I'd always been skeptical by nature, so I was kind of doubtful about it, but I just rolled with it. The night of the party, this girl, and I'll call her April, arrived with her table. It wasn't anything spectacular, just an old fold-up square card table that had belonged to her grandma. It had a vinyl covering on the top that had a wood grain pattern, and a large diamond shape and a different pattern of wood grain, and yet another wood grain pattern inside of that. After the usual eating of pizza and watching movies, we went upstairs to the birthday girl's room where April set up her table. Everyone gathered around it, and they explained to me that you had to close your eyes and concentrate, while lightly resting 2 fingers on top of the table and repeating with everyone in unison, "Rise, table, rise, table, rise," over and over. Obviously, I didn't take it seriously and giggled through it while everyone else was serious. But then, the table rose up on 2 legs and just hovered there. I mean, the 2 legs had to be at least 12 inches off the ground. I was obviously stunned when I opened my eyes and looked for any possible explanation as to how this was possible. But there wasn't any. As long as we kept our index and middle fingers lightly on top, it stayed like that. The girls started to ask the table random questions, and if the answer was a yes, it would lower the side that was raised up and almost touch the ground, and then go back up and wait for the next question. If the answer was no, it wouldn't lower and would just stay raised up. Of course, we asked it stupid questions, but the thing that really struck me was when they tried to guess which boy I liked. Okay, it was stupid, I was 12. I could tell you that nobody knew who I liked, as I was the new girl and had kept it to myself. They continued to guess different boys, and the table did not indicate a yes, until they finally got around to asking if I liked the boy I actually had a crush on. It said yes. I mean, how did it know? None of these girls knew, and trust me, I was very discreet about it. Things turned darker after a while, and we tried to ascertain the origin of whoever was actually communicating with us. It felt like something was sucking us deeper and deeper in. We were tired and tried to say goodbye to it, but it wouldn't say goodbye and seemed to get angry because it started to move up and down violently when answering a yes to our questions. The girl, April, had told us the one rule was that you couldn't just take your hands off the table. You had to say goodbye properly and release it. Through asking yes or no questions, it said that it was a young child who still slept in a crib, who was also smothered in the crib in the 1800s in England. Red flag. How could a child that young understand any of our questions at all? Then it mentioned that it wanted us to travel to England to find its bones and bury it properly. Someone asked it eventually if it knew who Jesus was, and it gave an answer of no. Then someone took a Precious Moments crucifix off the wall and set it on the table. The table shook violently, enough to knock it onto the floor. That was pretty much enough for me at that point. Of course, I couldn't sleep later while everyone else slept soundly, and I still was scared even when I went home the next day. As an adult in my 30s now, firmly rooted in logic and reason, when I look back, I have more questions than answers. All I can say for certain is that did happen, just as I've said it did. It was no illusion, and nothing that the 10 of us collectively imagined that we had experienced. I believe it was something very sinister that tried to suck in a bunch of little girls by pretending it was a child. I mean, who knows what it wanted? I can only speculate that what it wanted wasn't good. Whistling at 1:30 a.m. by Kathy Day Knight. I got home from my boyfriend's house around 1:30 a.m. on a Friday. I parked my car down the road from my house since we don't have a space, and as I got to my walkway to the front door of my house, I heard a short 1 to 2 whistle. Not like wolf whistling, but a very quick one, like when you're trying to get someone's attention. I stopped and looked around, and I couldn't see anyone or hear anyone moving. I'm pretty familiar with my neighbors. We're in a small dead-end street, and in the 10 years we've lived here, they'd never done anything like this, so I think I can rule them out. Anyway, as I went to the top step of the landing, I heard the whistle again. I stopped, looked around, and again I saw and heard nothing. I felt my heart start to race, and I turned my back to put my key in the door. And as I was putting my key in the lock, I heard the fucking whistle again. But it sounded closer, like it came from a slightly different direction. Still from behind me, but closer to where I was. I've never opened my door so fucking fast, and I peeked through the windows to the side and still couldn't see who it could have been. The next day, I told my family and boyfriend over dinner about the whistling, and they all said, "Oh, that's a bird, that noisy bird." And yes, there is a noisy bird in our area that makes noise at day and night. However, it's not a whistle as so much more of a high-pitched tune that goes for 2 or 3 seconds. It's a distinct noise and sounds nothing like a normal whistle. And of course I can distinguish between the two because I've heard this bird all day every day for a few months now. Fast forward to this morning. My mom messaged me and said my sister heard whistling last night. Before she could send her next message, I said if you're going to say it's a bird, it's not. She said my sister told her it definitely came from a person, and it was like a song, but not that bird we were talking about. It was a person. My sister said she heard it at 4 a.m. and thought someone was in the house. It was that clear, and I wanted to scream but was too scared. I don't know. Maybe it's a new bird that's flown to our neighborhood. But in the years we've been here, no one in the family has mentioned any creepy things like whistling in the night. And for it to happen a couple of times within the space of 1 week, I don't know, man. Weird. If anyone has heard of similar stuff happening in the middle of the night like this, let me know. Update. I heard the whistling last night, but not the initial whistle from a week ago. I heard the singing whistle that my sister heard. It was loud and clear, enough to wake me up from my sleep around 3:30 a.m. I sat up and stopped to listen, and it was a tune. I tried to hear if it was a song, and then maybe I could recognize it. But it wasn't anything I recognized. It was so creepy hearing it so clearly. I can't believe I woke up from it. It didn't sound like it was coming from inside, but very close to my house, outside, on my side of the house. I told my mom, and now she's all freaked out because the two of us have heard it. What if someone is lurking around the house, and all that? My dad, being a big, strong, macho, nothing scares me kind of guy, is telling us it's the neighbors or birds, and to just relax. Now can I be scared? Dogman Encounter by Anonymous. I bought a house in the mountains in a quiet established neighborhood within walking distance of the town center. After moving in, I was adopted by a cat. She was just dumped by one of the neighbors, and even though I'd never had a cat, I did love animals. She had been outside her whole life, 12 years at that time, so I was slowly introducing her to a hybrid indoor-outdoor life. It was October, and it had grown chilly, so I would bring her in at night before I went to bed. She was usually waiting on the back porch to be let in. I flipped on the porch light and stepped outside. You know how you can experience a flurry of events in seconds, but it feels like it's in slow motion? It was like another part of me was watching what I was doing in slow motion playback. And this is what happened. I felt something supernatural before I even saw it. The feeling was undeniable and consistent for me. Like I'm on a gravity drop ride at a carnival. The top of my head feels like there's a hive of bees on it, and I am instantly and totally present. I looked, and there was a gigantic black animal in my backyard. My back porch is up about 5 steps above the ground, so I was seeing this from a higher vantage point. My first thought was bear, because I have chased black bears out of my yard on occasion, but never the backyard. And this was bigger than a bear. It had jet black fur and was snuffling loudly on the ground as if it was trying to pick up a scent. The cat was not on the porch, and I wondered if the animal had snatched her, so anger boiled up in me pretty fast. Again, this all happened in seconds. So I yelled out, "Hey!" and scared the hell out of that thing. It yelped in surprise and spun to take off. It was so big and so fast that I heard its back paw tear out a clump of grass as it took off. It was impossibly, ridiculously fast. If you've ever seen a bear run, they can be quick, but they kind of wobble and bounce when running. This thing took off in a streak. I wasn't thinking anything other than find the cat. So I ran into the house, went through it, and burst out the front door yelling, "You motherfucker! You killed my cat! I'll strangle you with my own hands!" It was still there. I saw it dive behind a row of hedges across the street. I caught the tail end of it, and it was a long, bushy tail. I stood in my front yard, still not registering that this was a gigantic animal that could easily kill me. It poked its head halfway around the hedge to peek at me, and it looked exactly like a wolf. Then it took off again. I was frantically now back in the house, running around calling for my cat, but she was nowhere to be seen. I got in my car, drove around the neighborhood looking for her, and figured if I saw that thing again, I could report it. I didn't find anything. And when I got home, the neighbor's dog was outside in their fenced backyard. He was right near the spot the wolf had been in my yard, and he started pawing at the ground, digging and howling. I'd never seen him behave that way before. I kept circling the house looking for my cat, and I was standing out front when she came into the yard from the neighbors. She walked up to me and looked terrified. Puffed fur, huge eyes. I picked her up, and at that point she wasn't into being held. But this time she locked her paws around my neck and clung to me for about 10 minutes, shaking. She hasn't done that since. And I had witnessed her casually hanging out 10 feet from a giant male bear before. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I was thinking about the thing me and my friends saw on the road that night 2 years before. I got online and started searching werewolf and started going down rabbit holes. I posted what I had seen on a neighborhood forum, and a guy commented, "Thank God, I'm not crazy. That thing passed in front of my car a few nights ago at 2:30 in the morning. It was so big I thought I was hallucinating." So with that post, I had a little validation. Thankfully, I've never seen that thing again, but I will never forget the bizarre energy that surrounded it and how it affected me. Strange Occurrences at My Old House by Potential Ad. This happened a while ago when I was around 11. I'm now 20. And some of my older cousins, me and my siblings, were home alone. All told, we were between the ages of 8 and 14. While we were playing games, we had an Xbox, someone accidentally turned on a switch that was broken, and that led to the upper part of the house's electricity shutting off. Someone apparently had clicked the switch without knowing, but oddly nothing happened, so none of us were aware. After some time, we went to my room and were simply playing board games and talking, and after about an hour or so into it, the lights shut off, the electricity on the upper part of the house going away. But at that point, none of us knew what the reason was. Well, it went out, and we were pretty bummed about it, and unfortunately none of us had phones or a flashlight with us. And this is where things got creepy. All of this happened at night, so when the lights went out, there was no other light coming through the window. Even though we were creeped out as it was, we could have sworn that we heard footsteps on the stairs outside. Our house was built in a way that we could all hear any noise, especially someone walking on the staircase, and doubly so in my room because we only had a wall separating. We all shivered, and I started crying, along with a few others. We were totally convinced that we had an intruder or someone outside, because the steps were really loud and quick, like someone was running. No one was meant to be outside. Everyone who was in the house was in that room with us. We were terrified, so we just held hands and hugged each other, hoping the intruder or whoever it was wouldn't enter our room. It was quiet for a while, but then we literally heard someone trying to open the door. and luckily one of us had locked it. We were all terrified. Now all of us were crying. But then the sound went away. We started praying relentlessly, and we were all so shaken up and scared that none of us moved. We all stayed in the same positions, holding on to one another, and silently praying or crying. After about an hour, the oldest in the group, my cousin who was 14, decided she'd go out and investigate, and none of us wanted her to go, because we were so terrified. She went anyway, and we all heard the noises, so we were positive that she would see someone or something. But she went out, and it took her about 15 minutes, and she checked the electric fuse box and switched it back on so the lights came on again. But all of us were scared to go out of the room. She had to come back and tell us that no one was there. Finally, we all left the room, and most of us just chalked it up to us spooking ourselves or hearing noises. I'm an atheist, and I don't really believe in ghosts. But I really don't know what that was all about, what we had heard. But it's one of those things that was buried away in my mind that I hadn't thought about in a while until now. The Lady by Complete Rip. So, this is a true story. I'm now 16, and I had a series of events happen throughout the period between 12 and 11 years old. And this was the second event to happen. So, just a little backstory. I share a room with my older sister, and we had a different setup in the room with our furniture than now. So if you can imagine, my door would be at a 90-degree angle most of the time. The reason for that was because the way my bed was situated, we couldn't open the door the whole way. My bed faced the door, and we also weren't allowed to shut the door. And anyway, my sister's bed was on the left of me. However, when I lied down on my bed, there was a dresser blocking our view from seeing each other. Yes, this is all relevant to the story. One night, everything was normal. We went to sleep, and I woke up. I was on my side and looked out to the window, half awake. It was morning, but something was weird, and I ignored the feeling and turned to lie on my back with my head leaning against my bed frame. I was fully awake, and I froze as I looked straight to the frame of the door, and there was a woman with her head tilted to one side, staring at me and smiling. I can describe this woman vividly to this day, and no, she wasn't anyone I had ever seen in my life. She was just smiling, and I couldn't see her body, just her head. She was straight up staring at me, and she didn't lose eye contact. She had this pinkish-red lipstick, dark wavy short hair, dark brown eyes, and looked to be in her late 20s or early 30s. I looked to my left with my eyes not moving my head or my body to see if my sister was awake and seeing the same shit. But I couldn't see her, so I looked back, and the lady was still staring at me. However, at the time, I wasn't scared. I was calm. Which I questioned later, because how could I be so calm when I saw a random lady in my room staring at me smiling, and never breaking eye contact for what seemed like forever? I ended up just dozing off again. But the thing is, now I'm weirded out about it, and I've only realized that afterwards. Her head was tilted to the side, but her hair was perfectly fucking still, which I don't know how to explain it. But it should have fallen at least in front of her face. But no, it just stayed there, in place. I haven't told my mom about it. Please tell me your thoughts on this, because I know it was not sleep paralysis, as I've had that before, and this was way different. Hey gang, thanks for listening to this episode of Uncle Josh's True Scary Stories. If you have a true scary story of any nature that you'd like to hear narrated on this channel or my podcast, email it to unclejoshtruescarystories@gmail.com. I read them all. If you would be so kind, please give this video a thumbs up, consider becoming a subscriber, and maybe even tell your friends about it. If you've got the time, please leave a comment in the comment section and let me know what you thought of the stories. I'll get back to you as quickly as I can. If you'd like to take your support of the channel a step further, find a link to my Patreon page in the description, and maybe even purchase some Uncle Josh and Campfire Crew merchandise. As I said, there's new designs coming, and I'm hoping to get at least 2 more up this weekend. If you like chupacabras, I've got a solid one for you. A link to that storefront at TeePublic is in the description too. Everyone, be excellent to each other. And until next time, be wary of things that go bump in the night. It could be anything. A ghost, a monster, or the guy next door.